Stop being dramatic. We left early. Monica found the perfect engagement dress, but the deposit is $5,000. Transfer the money from your savings now. Do not be selfish. This is your sister's future. I read that text message while standing on stage, holding my master's degree as the valedictorian of my class. I looked up and saw 3 empty seats in the front row. My family had skipped my graduation to go shopping, and now they wanted me to pay for it. I did not text back. I simply opened my banking app and hit delete. You might be wondering why a 29-year-old woman with a master's degree would let her family treat her this way. Why did I send them money for years? Why did I apologize for existing? To understand that, you have to understand the myth of the $1 million signature. It is the story my father, Gary, told at every Christmas dinner, every birthday, and every moment he needed to remind me of my place. 22 years ago, my father had a meeting scheduled with a group of investors. He claims he had secured a spot as a founding partner in a tech startup that is now worth billions. All he had to do was sign the check for his buy-in. But that morning, 5-year-old Crixie climbed onto his desk and knocked over a bottle of ink. It ruined the check. It ruined his shirt. He missed the meeting. He missed the buy-in. And according to him, he missed out on a life of private jets and mansions. Growing up, I did not hear bedtime stories. I heard about the life we should have had. If we were short on rent, Gary would look at me and sigh. If Monica wanted a toy we could not afford, Teresa would whisper. Ask your sister why we are poor. I internalized that guilt before I could even do multiplication tables. I believed I owed them a life. So, I spent my entire childhood trying to pay off a debt I did not understand. By 14, I was working under the table at a diner, scrubbing grease off plates until my hands were raw. I did not keep my paycheck. I put it on the kitchen counter every Friday. Gary would take it without saying thank you. He would just nod, as if I were finally making a small dent in the interest I owed him. Meanwhile, Monica was raised to be the prize I had destroyed. She was the golden child. The second chance. While I was working double shifts to pay for my own school supplies, Monica was getting private vocal lessons and pageant coaching. When I drove a rusted sedan that broke down every time it rained, they bought Monica a brand new SUV because she needed to look successful to attract the right kind of friends. I was the engine that kept the house running, but she was the hood ornament they polished. For the last 4 years, I have paid their mortgage. Every single month. $2,000. I told myself I was being a good daughter. I told myself I was helping them out of a rough patch. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was paying rent for the space I took up in their world. I was buying their tolerance. I remember one night, I came home late from work, exhausted, and found them eating a steak dinner they had ordered from a high-end steakhouse. There was no plate set for me. Gary looked up, wiped grease from his chin, and said, "There is some peanut butter in the pantry, if you are hungry. And by the way, the air conditioning is acting up. You should look at that." I ate a spoonful of peanut butter in the dark, standing over the sink, and I fixed the air conditioner. I thought if I just worked harder, if I just paid a little more, eventually the ledger would balance. Eventually, they would look at me and say, "You did good, Crixie. We are even." But standing in that diner after graduation, staring at my burger, I realized the ledger would never balance, because the debt was not real. It was just a leash, and I had been choking on it for 24 years. The week after graduation, I walked into the bank with a singular purpose. I had spent 4 years eating ramen and working double shifts at the library to save exactly $25,000. It was not just money. It was my exit strategy. It was the deposit on an apartment in the city where nobody knew my last name. I handed the teller my withdrawal slip. She typed for a moment, frowned, and then turned her screen toward me. The balance was 0. I felt the blood drain from my face. I asked for the transaction history. There it was. A withdrawal made yesterday. A cashier's check made out to Prestige Luxury Autos. The signature at the bottom was mine. But the loop on the letter K was wrong. It was a forgery. And I knew exactly who held the pen. I drove home. I pulled into the driveway and saw it immediately. A brand new, cherry red convertible sat gleaming in the sun. Monica was in the driver's seat, taking selfies, while Teresa clapped her hands in delight. They looked like a picture-perfect family. And I was the invisible financier. I walked up to them. My hands were not shaking. I felt a strange, icy calm settling over me. I asked Teresa why my bank account was empty. She did not even look guilty. She looked annoyed that I was interrupting the moment. She told me that Monica had started dating a man from a very wealthy family. She said Monica needed a car that signaled status, or she would be rejected. She said it was an investment in the family's future. I looked at Gary. He was leaning against the porch railing, nursing a beer. I told him that was grand larceny. I told him that was my life savings. Gary laughed. He took a slow sip of his beer and said the words that finally severed the last thread of my attachment. Consider it interest on the $1,000,000 you cost me, Crixie. You are getting off cheap. In that moment, the fog lifted. For years, I thought I was just the least favorite child. But standing there, watching them fawn over a car bought with my stolen labor, I realized the truth was much darker. I was dealing with the glass child syndrome, but with a twist. They did not just look through me. They consumed me. They resented my competence because it highlighted their own mediocrity. Every time I fixed a problem, paid a bill, or achieved a goal, it reminded them that they were failures who needed a child to survive. They did not steal my money just to help Monica. They stole it to sabotage me. If I moved out, if I succeeded, they would lose their scapegoat. They needed me broken so they could feel whole. I did not scream. I did not demand the keys. I walked past them, into the house, and went to my room. I took a single duffel bag from the closet. I packed 2 changes of clothes, my laptop and my diploma. I left the rest. The clothes, the furniture, the memories, they could keep it all. I walked back out the front door. Monica was revving the engine, laughing as the exhaust filled the air. Gary and Teresa were discussing where to go for dinner to celebrate. They did not even turn their heads as I walked down the driveway. They thought I was going to cool off. They thought I would be back on Monday to pay the electric bill. They thought they had won. But as I got into my rusted sedan and started the engine, I knew something they did not. They had just stolen $25,000. But they had lost the only person in the family who knew how to balance a ledger. I was not just leaving. I was taking my competence with me, and they were about to find out just how expensive it was to be useless. 2 years later, I was sitting in a corner office with a view of the city skyline. I was not just Crixie anymore. I was a forensic auditor for a major firm. My job was literally to find the truth, hidden in numbers. I spent my days hunting down embezzlement schemes and corporate fraud. I looked for the gaps where the money went missing. I got very good at spotting liars. I got cold. And I got rich. My phone lit up on my desk. It was Luke, my younger brother. He was the only one I still spoke to. He was the quiet observer in a house full of noise. He sent me a photo. No caption, just an image of a crumpled letter he had found hiding under Gary's mattress. It was a notice of default. Foreclosure proceedings. I zoomed in on the dates. They had not paid the mortgage in 18 months. Basically, the moment I stopped sending my checks, the house of cards collapsed. They had been pretending everything was fine, keeping up appearances for the neighbors, while the bank was preparing to take the roof over their heads. Then, Luke sent a second photo. It was a page from our mother's old diary, dated 22 years ago. I read the handwriting, and the air left my lungs. Gary did not go to the meeting today. He sat in the driveway for an hour. He told me he was too scared to risk the money. He said he is going to tell the investors he missed the appointment because Crixie spilled ink on the check. It is easier than admitting he choked. I stared at the phone until the screen went dark. He was never going to be a billionaire. He was never a victim of a clumsy 5-year-old. He was a coward who got cold feet. He had blamed a toddler for his own failure for 2 decades just to protect his ego. He had let me slave away in diners and libraries to pay a debt that did not exist. Luke texted again. They are panicking. Monica is engaged to a guy from old money. She promised him an engagement party at the family estate. If they lose the house before the party, she loses the wedding. The auction is Tuesday. I did not call them. I did not offer a loan. I called my lawyer. I told him to set up an anonymous land trust. We called it the KT Blind Trust. My name would not appear on any public records. I instructed him to buy their debt from the bank. Then, I instructed him to bid on the house at the auction. I sat there in my office, watching the digital auction counter tick down. I did not feel happy. I felt the cold, metallic satisfaction of a trap snapping shut. They thought my silence for 2 years was weakness. They thought I was somewhere crying, waiting for them to call. They did not know that in my world, silence is just the sound of the evidence being compiled. I wasn't hunting for an apology anymore. I was hunting for ownership. The screen flashed. Sold. The digital signature on the deed solidified. The transaction cleared. I owned the roof over their heads. I owned the walls where they hung their lies. I owned the driveway where they parked the car they stole from me. I was not their daughter anymore. I was their landlord. And rent was finally due. My lawyer called them the next morning, posing as counsel for the KT Blind Trust, the private group that had quietly bought the house. He offered a grace period. 30 days. Long enough for Monica's engagement party. One catch. They had to sign a temporary occupancy agreement. They celebrated. Signed in 10 minutes. Never reached Clause 24C. I wrote it myself. No structural changes. No unlicensed electrical work. No overcrowding. Any violation meant immediate termination. 2 days before the party, Luke sent photos. Monica wanted a Versailles theme complete with a massive chandelier. Unlicensed workers drilled into a load-bearing beam and rigged backyard lighting with spliced wires. Fire hazard. Illegal. A perfect breach. At 8 that morning I arrived with the fire marshal and code enforcement. Caterers were unloading champagne. Monica screamed about napkins. Gary supervised the drill crew. Inside, inspectors saw cracks, sagging beams, tangled cords, orange sticker on the door, condemned, unsafe for occupancy, power cut. Gary exploded. Teresa screamed it was their house. The officer corrected her. It belonged to the KT Blind Trust. I walked up with the deed and contract. Clause 24C. You drilled into my ceiling. Lease terminated. Monica lunged at me, stopped by police. Vendors fled. Then a Bentley arrived, her future in-laws. They took one look at the sticker. Gary restrained on the porch and drove away without speaking. Gary begged. I told him the truth. He'd blamed me for 20 years over a spilled drink. Now he lost a house to arrogance. They had 60 minutes to pack. That afternoon, the engagement collapsed by text. The house sold the next day. A week later, I watched a bulldozer tear through the living room. Gary and Teresa ended up in a cheap apartment. Monica works retail, paying off wedding debt. My number changed. I mailed them a final package. A cheap white shirt and $50. Debt paid. Marcus drove us onto the highway. I didn't look back. Have you ever been the glass child while the golden child got everything? Tell me your story in the comments.